So abstract for a research in English studies. Okay, the most primary thing, of course, is a topic, but do not jump on the first topic that comes to your mind. We begin from very broad. Even when you say that you are going to work on a novel by a particular writer, like some of you said, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, that is a very broad topic because there are so many aspects of both the novel and the novelist. Therefore, first you need to narrow down your topic. What specifically in Jane Eyre you would like to study? You have to narrow it to the extent where you can focus on one particular line of research with reference to that particular text. So the novel has form, the novel has themes, the novel has language, the novel has its own historical and cultural context, and then the novel has certain influences. The novel was influenced by some writers, the novel influenced some other writers, it generated some movement, so on and so forth. So there is so much about the novel. Only when you narrow it down, you know what you're going to do with this topic and with this text. So the first thing that you should keep in mind related to the topic that you mentioned in your abstract is that it should be narrow enough. Number two, it should be researchable. So not all topics are researchable. So there are different criteria to assess that. Of course, the primary criteria is if it is too broad, you can't research it. Similarly, if it is too narrow, it can't be researched. So, for example, you cannot just study the representation of uh, drawing room in Jane Eyre, right? Because that will be such a limited topic. You cannot just focus on the representation of a drawing room in Jane Eyre. However, if you really want to work on the representation of uh, a drawing room, you might say that representation of a drawing room in a few representative Victorian novels. Okay, that way you will only be reading those chapters from a few novels in which the drawing rooms have been talked about. So probably you will end up focusing just on 50 to 60 pages of 2 to 3 novels. Okay, so the topic therefore should neither be too narrow nor it should be too broad. Also, the topic that you choose should have some sense of conducting research. In other words, there should be a research question. We will talk about that later on the next slide. So there should be a question that you want to explore. So for example, you cannot just say that you are going to study the drawing rooms in Victorian novel. However, you might say something like this, that you want to study uh, the drawing rooms in Victorian novel as representative of Victorian culture. That way your reader or your listener will have some idea of what your research is going to be. So the topic will become researchable. In this case, the topic will become researchable because your reader can see, or you can see yourself, that you are going to study the drawing rooms in order to make a case that the description of drawing rooms in the Victorian novel represent the Victorian values, right? So the research question will be, in what ways do the drawing rooms in Victorian novel are representative of Victorian culture? So that will become a question, right? So a successful topic usually can immediately be turned into a question as well. The next factor that you should keep in mind while choosing a topic is how much time you have, right? So the topic that you choose, it should be manageable within that time frame. So too broad a topic, for example, if you are going to focus on so many novels or so many poets or playwrights, again you need to check how much time you have and how much reading you can accomplish in that given time frame. If you are going to do archival research, look up how much you will have to read. Okay, so keep the time constraint in mind. Finally, resources. It is very important that at this stage of your topic, you think of the resources that you will need for that particular topic. If you realize that you cannot access those resources, it is better to change the topic. So don't spend a lot of time on a topic and then decide you cannot access the resources. So for example, if it is going to be archival research, you should determine whether you can access those archives. If you realize you cannot, then you should change the topic and focus on a topic for which the archives are easily available to you. Now, after topic in your abstract, the first thing usually you have is your thesis statement or contention. So basically, thesis statement is a very clear statement which expands your topic. It is a specific object of your research. What are you going to explore through this research, or what are you going to establish through this research? And it also refers to the specific and unique argument you will have in your research. So usually the first sentence over here, this one, this is for the thesis statement, which is the specific objective, and the contention is the specific and unique argument that you will have with reference to the text. So when I say the specific and unique, that means not only it should be specific, but also it should be reasonably new argument. It should not be an obvious argument. For example, to say that Jane Eyre is a feminist novel, this is a unique argument. Oh, sorry, this is a specific argument, but this is not a unique argument. It is a very old, hackneyed, and oft repeated and obvious argument. Okay, so your argument, the broader argument of your paper, which is called contention as well, and you should mention that in your abstract, that specific argument should be unique at the same time. It should be reasonably unique. Okay, it should be questioning something which is commonly known, or it should be introducing something new, or it should be somehow challenging the current interpretation of the primary text. Now, talking about primary text, there are two kinds of text that you deal with in the research that you undertake in English. The first one is called primary. So the primary texts are the one on which you conduct research. So the primary texts are the subject of your analysis. That is what you analyze, okay, um, as the subject of your analysis. Usually the primary text in literary studies are either novels or poetry or drama or film uh, or painting, these are primary texts. Secondary texts, on the other hand, are the material that facilitate your research. Okay, now that material could be archive. It could also be um, some oral narrative. They could also be research articles written by other writers. They could also be the books of history or sociology or culture studies written by other writers. Okay, so all of them together are called secondary texts. Now, regarding the secondary text, it's very important that the secondary text that you choose for your research, they are authentic and they are from reliable sources. So do not take a random website's information as your secondary text. So for example, if you're studying a novel from a feminist perspective, you might find lot many uh, student managed websites on which you will find lot many analysis, feminist analysis of that particular text. Okay, they are not authentic resources. Authentic resources are the ones which you find on some research database, for example, JSTOR, Project Muse. Now, in your abstract, after the thesis statement and contention, you should mention primary and secondary text. And after the primary and secondary text, you should also mention the objectives of the research. Now, the objectives are little more detailed as compared to the thesis statement or contention. The objective should be focused, specific, and realistic. That is, they should be attainable. So while in the thesis statement or contention, you might say that the this research or this paper contends that the drawing rooms in the Victorian novel are representative of Victorian culture. That could be your contention. Okay, I'm assuming it may not be, a very well researched topic, the way I have put it. It might be, I don't know, but I'm just giving you an example. So that could be a contention, right? But for objectives, you more broadly say, for example, that you might choose the pronoun I as well, that I will be analyzing uh, three Victorian novels. You can name the novels as well. In fact, you might have named the novels over here in the primary and secondary text. Uh, if you have already named them, you can just say that I will be analyzing these novels using a particular historical book about the record of uh, drawing rooms in Victorian age. Okay, so objectives are like that. So in objectives, you go into a little more detail what exactly you will do in this research. Okay, so in the contention or in the thesis statement, you basically tell your argument, that what is the main argument of your research. But in objectives, you tell a little more about how actually, what actually you will do in your research. Will you read the novels? Will you analyze them? How will you analyze them? Things of that kind. You should also tell in your abstract how will you conduct the research, because at the end of the day it is about the research article, right? So how are you going to conduct the research? So do not uh, take this for granted that your research is going to be just an essay that you are going to write. Rather, you should be consciously aware of the research method that you are going to use, right? So I just put research methods over here because I assume that you know what research methods have we studied in the course. They are given in the outline as well, right? So you have to pick at least one of those research methods and specifically state what research method you will use for your paper. Okay, and it must appear in the abstract that you will write. Now, another very important thing for your abstract is the methodology. We have been discussing it previously too. Methodology is not exactly the research method. Research method is about how you undertake the research. Do you consult archives? Do you meet people and interview them? Do you read the primary text with reference to a secondary text of history? What exactly you do, right, in order to conduct your research? That is method. Okay. But methodology, on the other hand, is once you have decided your method, you also need a lens through which you read a text. So somebody, for example, was referring to 1984 by George Orwell, and he was saying that he is going to study Marxism in the novel. So I just want to kind of remind him and everybody else in the class that Marxism is a methodology, that is a theory or critical perspective through which you read a particular literary text. Methodology is an important component your um, of your paper. Okay, methodology is something very close to your theoretical framework. I didn't put that phrase over here as such, but methodology, in fact, when you look at this word theories, that probably should give you an indication of uh, the framework. Let me put this word over here so that you know about it more clearly. So methodology is your theories or a theory, critical perspectives or a critical perspective, or your theoretical framework. Okay, so now see, for example, you have think of any particular novel, or any particular play or any particular poem. Uh, you you can also do a kind of basic analysis of the text, and you can say, okay, the novel has this character and these themes, and it has a plot, and it has characterization, and it has free direct discourse, or it has symbols, and it has number of metaphors, so on and so forth. This kind of analysis that I just referred to is not uh, uh, the foundation for a research paper. In order to write a research paper, or simply speaking, in order to write a research essay on a particular novel, you must choose a theoretical lens through which you read that particular novel. So yes, definitely there are themes, but you study those themes with the perspective of a particular theory or theoretical framework. Okay, the example of theoretical framework is feminism. So many of you have been naming it feminism, right? You have been naming it a lot today as well. So feminist perspective is a perspective to study a novel or any particular literary text. Marxist perspective is also a theoretical framework. Trauma theory, some people name that. That also is a theoretical framework. Okay, so basically these frameworks are, beyond the scope of this particular course. There is another course on, I don't know, I think it's called Contemporary Literary Theory, if that is the exact title of the course. It is in that course that you learn about various theoretical frameworks, right? So for this course, our focus is basically the method, but you must use a methodology for this, for the paper that you are writing in this course. So in your abstract, you should mention methodology. Almost every one of you who shared the topic today, you mentioned the methodology along with that. So basically, you already know what methodology is, right? I'm just naming it, right? So feminist perspective or Marxist perspective, they are methodologies. So the last exam topic that a student shared related to Bacon, right? Francis Bacon's essay. So I did not encourage her to take that up for research because I couldn't think of any methodology she could probably use in order to analyze that. Okay. Uh, so methodology is very, very important. Without that, you cannot read a text with a particular theoretical lens. So students, when you write the abstract, please include all these components in it. You should have a topic. Of course, it will be on the top of your abstract. You should have thesis or and contention. You should have primary and secondary text. You should state the objectives. You should describe how will you conduct the research method, and you should mention the methodology of your research as well. Now, one last thing. Uh, you don't have to exactly follow the same order of all these components in the abstract. Usually the thesis statement and contention is right in the beginning of the abstract, okay, but rest of the things can be little arranged or rearranged depending upon your style of writing, okay, but you must include all these components in your abstract, right? So my